Welcome to TV Free Baltimore's Celebrity Interviews. In this episode, we interview Bernie Kopell.
Mr. Kopell.
Yes. Yeah, sure. What's it to you? Yeah, you want to make something out of it? What the hell's wrong with you? Get out of here.
Now, what did your father do for a living?
My father was a jeweler. He was a very talented salesman. He came from the Ukraine, I think at the age of 8. He escaped because things were not looking too good for Jews in the Ukraine. The Cossacks would rampage through the little shtetls, killing, maiming, and this was condoned by the government. So that was my family's cue to get out of there. And luckily it was more easier to come to Montreal than to New York, and they came to Montreal. And my father, at the age of 8, was in a little milk business with his brothers, and they were emptying milk from these great big vats into bottles, and the bottles broke because it was so freezing there. And then they came to New York, and miraculously he got into the jewelry business because of one of his older brothers, and at the age of 25, and this was incredible, he had 2 jewelry stores on, somebody's hilarious back there, he had 2 jewelry stores on 14th Street at the age of 25, and he spoke English with no accent, so he was very talented that way. And an amazing life. But the tradition in those days with a child was to be authoritative to the point of abuse, and he was not an easy father for me. But the good news is, because I detested the jewelry business and all the deceit that went on a daily basis, I rebelled. Luckily, I survived my rebellion, and I got into something that I enjoyed: wearing uniforms and speaking with accents.
Let me ask you, who in your family was funny?
Nobody.
Nobody.
Nobody in my family was funny. I do remember certain times that when my father would have a drink or 2 or 3, he was a stooge for sort of a funny magician by the name of Eddie Clark, and he would love to do this thing. He put a glass of water in his hand, and he would somehow get it around. I know you're probably not seeing this, and get it all the way around to where it didn't spill. Big deal, you might say. But he always had that in the back of my mind. But as far as his firstborn son was concerned, he did not want to take a chance of me being in show business, because there was probably no way where I could ever make a living. As it happens, I've been making a living in my chosen field for about 60 some odd years now. And I remember when I did the Jack Benny show, he was sick, he had a brain tumor, and it was removed by a neurosurgeon, and this neurosurgeon came into the waiting room at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, and he said, "We got it all," proudly, but within 3 years it came back and killed my father at the age of 59. So we're all in Mount Sinai, and he is in what seemed like a coma. And he let out a gigantic fart. And I said, "To whom was that directed?" And he said, barely to be heard, he said, "To whom it may concern." The humor of a man dying. So, yeah.
Now, led you into wanting to go into acting?
Because I didn't want to be who I was at the time, because life was kind of unbearable. Because he convinced me through his actions, through his very abusive behavior, that I did not have a brain that was workable, and anytime I tried to be successful, I was going to fail. Don't go away, because I have to talk to you.
Now, you did go then NYU.
I went to NYU. They didn't really want me to go to NYU to be an actor, but I prevailed and I went. And oddly enough, when you set your mind at something, I knew this is fun to do acting things. So of course, in high school, I got to be part of the verse choir, where you could be someone other than yourself without all the pressures of being you. So that was fun. Then I got to be in the radio workshop at Boys High. I went to Erasmus Hall. And then the All City Radio Workshop. And I said, this is really much more pleasant than what I have at home. And my attitude is just keep coming at him. And I lecture sometimes in classes for drama. And I say, when you go to school, it is great that you learn the techniques, because that's invaluable. But it's only when you get out of school that you learn what your marketability is. So anyway, at NYU, Jim Drury, the kid who played the Virginian, we sort of came up together. And Jim was just this ridiculously handsome guy with a gorgeous voice. He looked like a combination of Marlon Brando and Gregory Peck. So everybody saw Jim and they said, Hollywood. He went to Hollywood in his second year, and zap, started working. And we talked back and forth all the time. So one day after he's been there for a while, he calls and says, Bernie. I said, gee, you sound kind of excited. What is it? He said, I got an agent for you. And I said, oh my God, I got an agent. This is great. I fly out to California, and I go to his agent with my little rinky-dink photos and resume, and his agent is looking at, Herb Gold is looking at me like, did Jim tell you I'd be your agent? How can I be your agent? You're not handsome enough to be a leading man. You're not ugly enough to be a heavy. You know what you're selling? I said, I don't know. He said, if you don't know, how could I know? Did you ever look in the mirror? He said, I can't help you. Pushes back my things, and I was depressed again. And this was after coming out of the Navy. So Jim, my friend, joined me in a sympathy drunk, and we got shit-faced together. But nothing stopped me. My attitude was that I jumped into the pool not even realizing or caring if there was any water in it or not. That's how much I wanted it.
What about the discovery?
The discovery, okay, so the discovery was one of those happenstances. I don't even know how or why it happened. I had an agent, and the agent was very slow. He would send me up for parts that had already been cast. That's how slow this guy was. So I go up to CBS Television City on Beverly, and I go up to Marilyn Budgeon. I will never forget her name because this was a life-changing experience. And I come up for her, and she sees me, and she says, I'm so sorry, but the part you're up for has already been cast. And I said, okay, because I was expecting that. And I'm on my way out, and how this happened, I have no idea. On my way in, I'd seen 5 guys who could have been Jesus or Jose or Pablo or Juan. She says, excuse me, while you're here, Would you like to read for Pablo? Now I'm pissed. I mean, I am so frustrated and really angry. I said, okay, I'll read for Pablo. I had no idea how to do it, but I know Jack Parr has Jose Melis as his pianist and Jose Menes Bildenos going on. I'll do them. I didn't know if I could, but I'm going to take up the precious time of this producer, Buzz Blair. I look over the thing like this, okay. I'm ready. I go into his office and I nail it. And I get cast.
And that was what, Bright
As
Days?
the Brighter Day.
Brighter Day.
You're good.
Thank you.
You've done this before. You're not just an ordinary schmendrick. Okay.
It's special.
Yes, so that begins the whole deal for me with my first 5 years was nothing but a Latino on the Brighter Day, on the Jack Benny show, and he was such a prince. I got to play the Rinaldi brother. A little piece of that is I'm wearing a leather jacket with medals for shooting, and my supposed brother comes along. He's in a ballet costume with a cape, and behind him is a cutout of a human form. And Jack says, well, what do you do? And I said, I am the least important part of this act. My brother is the fastest human being in the world. I am going to shoot at him, and he, with his fantastic agility and grace, will dodge the bullets. Well, Jack said, well, amazing. Well, go ahead. I said, okay. May I have a drum roll, please? And my brother's standing there like this, and I go, and he does this insane gyration, and he dodges the bullet, and there's a grip behind the cutout of the human form who pulls off the thing. It looks like a bullet hole, and Jack sticks his finger in the hole, and he looks at the camera and he says, incredible. And it goes on. I don't want to do the whole thing. I shoot 2 bullets. He gets out of the way, and then I empty my 6 guns in the direction of my brother. And for a moment, he just stands there and then falls down dead. And Jack approaches the body. The camera's close on Jack. And he looks at the body, and then he looks at the camera and he says, well, I guess they just weren't ready for the big time. And at the end, I come on with another guy with a ballet costume and a cape, and Jack says, who's this? And I said, my other brother. But it was a brilliant sketch.
Sounds like it was.
So now at this time, my father is dying of a brain tumor, but he's got my picture with Jack Benny and myself. And people are passing by in the jewelry exchange, and he said, my son, my son. And that was just a horrible...
And that's what your father saw like the first time he was proud of you.
Because I overcame the challenge of his personality. It was a very odd thing. So today, every once in a while, I get more than a twinge of sadness that he never got to see my larger success. And he had, aside from all of the rough behavior, when my mother would cut open a tomato, sitting down at the table, he would look at the seeds in the tomato and said, isn't this amazing? Isn't this wonderful that here's a tomato and there are seeds in the tomato that in turn will make other tomatoes, and those tomatoes will make other tomatoes. So my great sadness is that my father never got to see the seed of his seed, my sons, or my larger success. So there it is.
Let me ask you, where did you learn your facility for dialects?
I learned it by accident. I learned it by accident that I could do this just one of those things was people say, can you do such and such? And I said, well, I'll give it a shot. So I did the Russian accent, I did the Latino accent. I did. Robert Fuller is passing by, possibly the biggest pain in the ass that ever lived. But I love him anyway. Now, piss off.
All right.
Yeah.
Along with that, who were your comic heroes, your comic influences?
Comic influences were Sid Caesar, Danny Kaye. When I was a kid, I would pantomime Danny Kaye's records because he meant a lot to my family, because when my mother and father were on their honeymoon in 1932, Danny Kaye was a little tumbler. You might ask, what is a tumbler? He's a kid that the management hires, just getting room and board, and his job is to amuse and involve the customers with plays on Saturday night. And Mel Brooks went through the same kind of a thing. Keep the clown around, keep the people occupied so they don't go home. So it was all done for the benefit. So he was, David Daniel Kaminsky was Danny Kaye. So when he began his huge success, Lady in the Dark with Gertrude Lawrence, he stole the show. Holy mackerel, he stole it. And my parents would say, that's the kid, that's the kid. And then he did the movies, Hans Christian Andersen, and the Court Jester, on and on, and the kid from Brooklyn.
His wife,
Sylvia Fine wrote these brilliant songs. Anatole of Paris, and on and on and on. Danny Kaye. But
the story about Danny Kaye when you were on his show.
Yeah.
You to get the bigger laugh.
I didn't get. It's not that it wasn't a bigger laugh. I got a large laugh in a sketch, and all of a sudden I feel something in my arm, like whoa. He dug his nails into my forearm, and the look on his face was, I get the laughs. You set me up. So this was so different from Jack Benny, who understood that whoever gets the laugh on the Jack Benny show amplifies the Jack Benny show. But Danny Kaye had to be, he was the virtuoso, and it had to be that way because that was all he knew. So enough about Danny Kaye. I don't want to get into the whole thing.
It seemed like that was a big stride for you because here you are, you're continuously on that. You make 14 appearances or more on Get Smart, free, and you're also doing other things like Bewitched several times as the apothecary, a hippie, all kinds of other parts.
I learned that through labor, going over something, I learned that I could deliver. I was capable of delivering as a professional on all these things. Something that went against my early conditioning through my father, who convinced me that I couldn't do anything. I even had a fantasy that the only way I could ever get work would be if my father would bribe somebody in authority to give me, as a charity, to give me a salary. But I found out that I'm the authority. Like you're the authority in your own life.
Exactly.
So that became a great eureka moment, that you can do stuff.
I was going to say, one thing I noticed, especially when reviewing your career, was I was impressed by your great versatility in that you did drama and comedy. And, for example, doing Death of the Salesman with Lee J. Cobb, and doing some wild shows, playing Siegfried, which is like a very broad character.
Very divergent, but it was the same company that did Death of a Salesman with Lee J. Cobb, who I just worshipped, and Mildred Dunnick from the original Broadway show that got Emmys and Peabody Awards and all of this. I said, Lee J. Cobb, a world-level tragedian. Nobody could ever touch him. And Thomas Mitchell tried the same thing, and somebody else that I can't think of the name, Gene Lockhart did it in London, and also Paul Muni did it. Now, Paul Muni was certainly, I just reread his book, Actor, Muni Weissenfreund from the Yiddish Art Theater. But that was a hell of a play. So I adore doing that.
Now, you've done both. Do you have a preference to drama versus comedy, or do you feel equally comfortable?
I feel comfortable. Well, I can do both. But comedy is more fun because I realize that not everybody can do that. And I think I was born through my rebellion or whatever it was with that funny bone. They call it funny bone. I could say without modesty, having a talent to do that. So all through, like, Get Smart, later on Civil Wars, played a Russian, a very highfalutin wine expert who wanted to dump his wife with no settlement, with a Russian accent. As a matter of fact, I convinced Steve. What happened?
Oh, keep going.
Yeah. So Steve said, when I came in, Stephen Bochco, Civil Wars, Steve said, no accent, no accent. So I said, Steve, I know you've seen a number of people. He said, but I just had some tennis with Ili Nastasi. And he is maybe Romanian, he's not Russian, but his attitude was the attitude of, he didn't give a crap about anybody else. It was all a narcissistic approach to everything. Winning at all costs. And not even a consciousness of human kindness or humanity at all. I said, can I give it a shot that way? I don't want to waste your time, but I think that's very right. I got it. And working with Mariel Hemingway, legs up to almost as good as Juliet Prowse. And that was great fun to do in a serious way.
Let me ask you, because I know one of your last roles on film, I think major films, which I think was a dramatic role, did you draw on any of your father for playing the Cutter?
Oh, the Cutter. No, I drew on the tragedy that Jews went through with the Holocaust. The Cutter with Chuck Norris, who turns out to be a very dear, close friend of mine, because he inaugurated the Kick Drugs Out of America. He's a marvelous human being. He was a poor kid growing up in Oklahoma, and he has a great affinity for poor kids. They go into inner cities and get kids who would have no chance of a life into martial arts, where they grow in confidence and self-assertiveness. So I've been going there for 23 years. And Chuck gets up and he opens his heart to speak about these youngsters. And it's tradition for a girl or a boy to get up, talk about their horrible existence before kick drugs and what they've achieved, how they've overcome. And I said, I look over my wife and she's always in tears of inspiration when this happened. So we raised money. We raised $750,000 this past April. So it's just wonderful, and how it benefits the world to have kids who would have no life into kids who are contributing to society.
Do you have any current projects or things that you're working on?
Well, my current projects are really attending to my sons. My beautiful sons, my boys. Adam, who's now 18, he's going to be going to UC Santa Barbara, and Joshi, The little kid who's 14 is obsessed with baseball. He wants to be a Dodger. And that's the great fun of my life. And also coming to these things is so sweet.
You've been watching Celebrity Interviews on TV Free Baltimore.